either, but I do not see that fear of the Mingos or night marches can destroy your pretty looks."
"It is a new character for the Pathfinder to appear in, to compliment a silly girl."
"Not silly, Mabel; no, not in the least silly. The Sergeant's daughter would do discredit to her worthy father, were she to do or say anything that could be called silly."
"Then she must take care, and not put too much faith in treacherous, flattering words. But, Pathfinder, I rejoice to see you among us again; for, though Jasper did not seem to feel much uneasiness, I was afraid some accident might have happened to you and your friend on that frightful rift."
"The lad knows us both, and was sartain that we should not drown, which is scarcely one of my gifts. It would have been hard swimming of a sartainty with a long barreled rifle in the hand; and what between the game, and the savages and the French, Killdeer and I have gone through too much in company to part very easily. No, we waded ashore, the rift being shallow enough for that, with small exceptions, and we landed with our arms in our hands. We had to take our time for it, on account of the Iroquois, I will own; but, as soon as the skulking vagabonds saw the lights that the Sergeant sent down to your canoe, we well understood they would decamp, since a visit might have been expected from some of the garrison. So it was only sitting patiently on the stones for an hour, and all the danger was over. Patience is the greatest of virtues in a woodsman."
"I rejoice to hear this, for fatigue itself would scarcely make me sleep, for thinking of what might befall you."
"Lord bless your tender little heart, Mabel! But this is the way with all you gentle ones. I must say, on my part, however, that I was right glad to see the lanterns come down to the waterside, which I knew to be a sure sign of your safety. We hunters and guides are rude beings, but we have our feelings and our ideas, as well as any general in the army. Both Jasper and I would have died before you should have come to harm. We would."
"I thank you for all you did for me, Pathfinder. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you, and, depend on it, my father shall know it. I have already told him much, but have still a duty to perform on this subject."
"Tush, Mabel! The Sergeant knows what the woods be, and what men, true red men, be too. There is little need to tell him anything about it. Well, now you have met your father, do you find the honest old soldier the sort of person you expected to find?"
"He is my own dear father, and received me as a soldier and a father should receive a child. Have you known him long, Pathfinder?"
"That is as people count time. I was just 12 when the Sergeant took me on my first scouting, and that is now more than 20 years ago. We had a tramping time of it. And, as it was before your day, you should have had no father, had not the rifle been one of my natural gifts."
"Explain yourself."
"It is too simple for many words. We were ambushed, and the Sergeant got a bad hurt, and would have lost his scalp, but for a sort of inbred turn I took to the weapon. We brought him off, however, and a handsomer head of hair, for his time of life, is not to be found in the regiment than the Sergeant carries about with him this blessed day."
"You saved my father's life, Pathfinder!" exclaimed Mabel, unconsciously, though warmly, taking one of his hard, sinewy hands into both her own. "God bless you for this, too, among your other good acts."
"Nay, I did not say that much, though I believe I did save his scalp. A man might live without a scalp, and so I cannot say I saved his life. Jasper may say that much consarning you, but without his eye and arm the canoe would never have passed the rift in safety on a night like the last. The gifts of the lad are for the water, while mine are for the hunt and the trail. He is yonder, in the cove there, looking after the canoes, and keeping his eye on his beloved little craft. To my eye, there is no likelier youth in these parts than Jasper Western." For the first time since she had left her room, Mabel now turned her eyes beneath her, and got a view of what might be called the foreground of the remarkable picture she had been studying with so much pleasure. The Oswego threw its dark waters into the lake, between banks of some height, that on the eastern side being bolder and projecting farther north than that on its western. The fort was on the latter, and immediately beneath it were a few huts of logs, which, as they could not interfere with the defence of the place, had been erected along the strand for the purpose of receiving and containing such stores as were landed, or were intended to be embarked, in the communications between the different ports on the shores of Ontario. Two low, curved, gravelly points had been formed with surprising regularity by the counteracting forces of the northerly winds and the swift current, and, inclining from the storms of the lake, formed two coves within the river. That on the western side was the most deeply indented, and, as it also had the most water, it formed a sort of picturesque little port for the post. It was along the narrow strand that lay between the low height of the fort and the water of this cove that the rude buildings just mentioned had been erected. Several skiffs, bateaux, and canoes were hauled up on the shore, and in the cove itself lay the little craft from which Jasper obtained his claim to be considered a sailor. She was cutter rigged, might have been of 40 tons burthen, was so neatly constructed and painted as to have something of the air of a vessel of war, though entirely without quarters, and rigged and sparred with so scrupulous a regard to proportions and beauty, as well as fitness and judgment, as to give her an appearance that even Mabel at once distinguished to be gallant and trim. Her mould was admirable, for a wright of great skill had sent her drafts from England, at the express request of the officer who had caused her to be constructed. Her paint dark, warlike, and neat, and the long coach-whip pennant that she wore at once proclaimed her to be the property of the king. Her name was the Scud.
"That, then, is the vessel of Jasper," said Mabel, who associated the master of the little craft very naturally with the cutter itself. "Are there many others on this lake?"
The Frenchers have 3, one of which they tell me is a real ship, such as are used on the ocean, another a brig, and a third is a cutter, like the Scud here, which they call the Squirrel, in their own tongue, however, and which seems to have a natural hatred of our own pretty boat, for Jasper seldom goes out that the Squirrel is not at his heels.
"And does Jasper want to run from a Frenchman, though he appears in the shape of a squirrel, and that, too, on the water?"
Of what use would valor be without the means of turning it to account? Jasper is a brave boy, as all on this frontier know, but he has no gun except a little howitzer, and then his crew consists only of 2 men besides himself, and a boy. I was with him in one of his trapeuzes, and the youngster was risky enough, for he brought us so near the enemy that rifles began to talk. But the Frenchers carry cannon and ports, and never show their faces outside of Frontenac, without having some 20 men, besides their Squirrel, in their cutter. No, this Scud was built for flying, and the Major says he will not put her in a fighting humor by giving her men and arms, lest she should take him at his word, and get her wings clipped. I know little of these things, for my gifts are not at all in that way, but I see the reason of the thing. I see its reason, though Jasper does not.
"Ah, here is my uncle, none the worse for his swim, come to look at this inland sea."
Sure enough, Cap, who had announced his approach by a couple of lusty hems, now made his appearance on the bastion, where, after nodding to his niece and her companion, he made a deliberate survey of the expanse of water before him. In order to effect this at his ease, the mariner mounted on one of the old iron guns, folded his arms across his breast, and balanced his body, as if he felt the motion of a vessel. To complete the picture, he had a short pipe in his mouth. "Well, Master Cap?" asked the Pathfinder innocently, for he did not detect the expression of contempt that was gradually settling on the features of the other. "Is it not a beautiful sheet, and fit to be named a sea?" This, then, is what you call your